make sure to stay tuned. And towards the end of that, Ellie will come back in and share details with everybody. But thanks so much for joining us this afternoon. We're grateful for your time. I'm Dana Steinlogge. I'm one of the partners here at Choice Solutions and co-lead up our sales team. So on behalf of our organization, we appreciate you making time here today. Before we kind of get it kicked off or transition over to Dennis with Nutanix, I was just going to share for a few minutes just a little bit of overview on our company background for those of you who may not be too familiar with our team, just so you have a little bit better understanding of who we are. So for us, there we go. Technology is a great thing. For our team, we are mainly in the central US as far as people, where we're located, but we do have a growing presence down in the Southeast. There's many of you who are coming in and joining us from all parts of the country. So thank you. We've had the opportunity through niche, through reputation, through referrals, through other means to serve customers across 44 different states over the last handful of years as a company. And I'll just share just a little bit on kind of the things that we know you're working on that maybe kind of line up with where we kind of come in to help out. So improving the employee experience with technology. It's been a big thing for the last few years, especially got heightened with COVID and the pandemic. Initiatives, whether it be modern workspace initiatives, whether it be secure hybrid work, things like that, where you're looking to provide the best user experience for your workforce, but also to kind of make sure and have the proper security and control, and make investments as an organization that'll help you with ambitions to become a better technology organization and hire and attract and retain top level staff. All the while know that, as IT leaders, you're working through a cloud journey of some regard for your organization, and evaluation of what mix of cloud services, whether it be SaaS or adoption of public cloud, or maybe hybrid cloud solutions make the most sense for your organization. So this transition, this journey that you're making to simplify operations for your business, to kind of have more of a usage-based consumption environment for your business, but have that scalability, flexibility, but also to adopt new world of security from a zero trust perspective. All the while, you're working on these things, but every IT organization is facing constraints of some degree, whether it be in people and the ability to handle the day-to-day upkeep, whether it be the ability to execute on projects, whether it be the retention and being able to hire, retain, develop. Everybody's facing challenges of some degree from an IT perspective, and that's where, whether it be products that we have or services that we offer, can kind of come in to help out. And we hear this a lot of times, and so I'm just going to share this here. But sitting down with a lot of customers or new organizations that we may not have the opportunity to meet with, and it's very common to hear that you just don't have good trusted partners in your portfolio. You have organizations you transact through, but maybe you just don't have technology partners that bring a lot of value, a lot of expertise into solutions that you might be making investments in. And so there's a need for that. There's companies that have a higher degree of value that they can bring and help with technology investments and solutions you might be looking to make. So that's a little bit of some of the things we think you're working on. And for us as a company, we're focused on bringing hybrid cloud solutions to your business and to our customers we have the opportunity to serve. So simpler, more secure IT environments from the data center, the cloud service, all the way down to the endpoint. And what we do, yes, we traditional, VAR, if you will. So reseller, we've got a number of innovative technology solutions in our portfolio that kind of have a history for always being on the leading edge and looking for technology solutions that'll disrupt the market and make things simpler for you as a customer to adopt. So have a lot of great solutions there, but more so, we feature a professional services staff. So we've got a great in-house engineering team to kind of come in and for like what we're going to share about today with Nutanix, being able to come in and help you deploy, unlock these new technologies, get them in place, successfully get going, but also to be there, throughout the life cycle and the journey of the technology investment to be able to help with ongoing health checks or just different upgrades or different things you might need through the process. But to go with that, for organizations that might be facing different constraints and various capacities on the day-to-day upkeep, we also can kind of come in from a managed services perspective and potentially be, a partner for you there, whether it be for some subset or a greater degree, some level of co-managed service for your business. We feature a 24/7 fully staffed network operations center and a great team there as well. So those, from the projects as well as the managed services, they're huge differentiators in terms of what we can bring beyond just being somebody to kind of transact or maybe adopt new technologies or services through. And just from our capacity, technology partnerships, today we're gonna have Dennis and we're featuring Nutanix. Nutanix has been a significant partner of ours. Talk about disruption, talk about transformation, as you're looking towards the cloud and adopting that right mix to the cloud. We felt Nutanix has been a huge value to our customers, and many of you are on here today. Some of you may be just perspective and may not be too familiar in learning, but a huge differentiator in helping to have that cloud-like simplicity, in your cloud journey, but have the, still be something with security, control, various capacities. You have legacy applications, be able to support that and something you can control in your data centers or wherever that, and kind of the best of both worlds. So Nutanix has been a huge partnership of ours. We also do a lot with Citrix from an end user computing perspective, and a significant amount too, as well as with Microsoft and what they're doing with Azure, whether it be from O365, from Azure Virtual Desktops as customers, and people are learning about that. So yeah, just a little bit about us. I don't want to take up too much time, but it's about the people. It's genuine folks. We strive to bring value into anything we're doing. So if we're engaged with you, it's our aim to be bringing value, not only in the beginning and helping you get started, but also just being that partner along the journey to help make sure your team's successful. And I believe we've got the team that can help you do that. So appreciate the opportunity to share just a little bit about us. But I want to get a transition now over to Dennis Arnold, and I want to thank him for joining us and for his time, just kind of and share insights with you on Nutanix, what they're seeing in terms of helping others simplify for IT environments, adopt a hybrid cloud, and so many other things that we've seen a lot of you be able to benefit from. So thanks for joining us, Dennis.
You bet. Thanks, Dana. Appreciate it. I'm going to set up my my share here. Let's see. I'm going to share that one. Share. Pop that open. All right. Can you see that all right?
Yep, good to go.
All right, perfect. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate you taking the time to let me talk to you today about Nutanix. And for any of you who've been to my sessions before, I'm pretty passionate about Nutanix and security and it's sorts of things like that. But I'm a channel SE with Nutanix, based in Fort Worth, Texas. And it's a little bit hot down here. I was just thinking about it the other day, and most days you turn on the faucet on your shower, and you wait for the cold water to come out. And actually, these days I kind of wait for all of the fire and flames to stop coming out before the hot water behind it finally extinguishes it. It's kind of crazy and hot, but we'll try to focus on cool things today. And if you're already familiar with Nutanix, I'm hoping to share some things with you today that maybe you didn't already know. Maybe things that you can add to your existing deployment, or if you're not already a Nutanix customer, hoping that I can convince you that Nutanix is good. Maybe not as good as steak and whiskey, but good nonetheless. All right, so let's get into it. Now, at Nutanix, one of the things that we do at a very high level is we want to find this, what I call an optimal common working ground and unification point for IT that revolves around data. So what does that mean? What that means is that historically with IT, we have these things that create a solution or an environment that don't always work together the way we want them to, that don't always work in unison to drive performance, to drive business outcomes. That's a big one, right? In a way that's easy to deploy, easy to manage, and brings teams together for a common goal, right? And for us, one of the common goals that we have is to disrupt complex IT and transform your business into something usable, right? And it's funny, one of the analogies that I use here that I just was thinking about today is my wife and my youngest son, who still lives at home, my two older ones moved away. They've been watching these Gordon Ramsay shows, right? Where he goes in and he's got this 24-hour operation where he's got to transform a hotel or a restaurant into something functional, right? And the one thing that I've noticed that all of these episodes have in common is that there's the lack of functionality between teams is what really is holding this business back. And I started thinking about that and thinking of it in terms of IT, right? So you've got a restaurant manager, and you've got a kitchen, and you've got a dining room, and you've got a bar, and all of these things, they don't work together. And there's nobody there to tie it all together. And if they are there to tie it all together, it doesn't work. And so it's a similar thing to me from an IT perspective. You have all of these silos, and we want to break those silos down. Now, it's not easy, right? Because it's complex. And now I use the analogy of making whiskey, right? I mean, because we're talking about whiskey and steak today. Making whiskey is complex, a lot like IT. It's got a number of different elements that have to come together just right? There's a lot of parts and pieces. You've seen the show, right? It's this fragile system that can blow up at any moment. It has all these single points of failure, right? In fact, whiskey in and of itself has its own chemistry, right? So it's an interesting thing, this chemistry of whiskey, but it's very volatile. Now, you're probably not going to blow anything up putting IT together, but you can make a lot of mistakes. And it's always been a very manual process, a very long and arduous manual process that keeps you from doing all these other things that you might otherwise want to do. Now, as far as making barbecue and making whiskey, right? We do it because we love it. We love the outcome, but that's where we should focus. We should focus on the outcome, not the process. But we could, in fact, make the process easier. Now, a lot of organizations, people are very interested in this as a service model, right? That decreases complexity. Now, if you're no moonshiner, right? And I'm assuming that none of you are moonshiners. You could recognize that the distilling process itself is pretty risky, or whiskey, as I call it. It's pretty whiskey, right? Now, even with whiskey, you don't have to figure out all the tips and tricks. You don't have to spend years unraveling the complexity, right? You simply enjoy the results. Now, in terms of the fact that you work with Choice, they could actually help very, very effectively remove this distilling process from your IT, right? Because as an amazing solution provider, they can just show up and give you what you see on the right here, the end result. Who likes cookies and whiskey? I do, apparently. This is at my house. This is one of my favorite whiskeys. It's called Yellow Rose. I'm particularly fond of rye whiskey. Okay, so if your relationship with your own IT environment is on the rocks, right, you can actually engage Choice and Nutanix to come in and help you figure that out, to get a good solution. And using another awful analogy, it's worth a shot, right? So why is it that we want to do this, right? And why is it that the old model just doesn't work right? Well, it's because it has layers and it has a lot of complexity. This complexity leaves you vulnerable to cyber attack, as an example, right? This stack that you see on the left, this old 3-tier stack, it's difficult to troubleshoot, and it's difficult to deploy. It's complex, and that complexity extends into a lot of areas, right? It's complex to buy, complex to deploy, complex to manage, scale, support. You buy storage in these big increments, and you buy compute in these large increments because you're buying for the future state, right? And what if you didn't predict your needs correctly? That's a risk that you take. And so, you end up over provisioning to mitigate some of this risk, and you end up with leftover IT. And if you've been to some of my sessions, leftover IT, it's bad. Leftover barbecue, not so bad. It's good, but leftover IT is like an old soggy salad, right? You don't want that. Okay, so what we do at Nutanix is re-platform IT in a process that I affectionately refer to as decomplexification, right? We take what you see on the left, this traditional legacy architecture, and again, a lot of people still do this. Many of you still do this because it's what you know, right? But again, it's complex, it's clunky, and there's a better, more efficient way to deliver IT. And there's a better, more efficient way to deliver apps and make sure that your data is working for you instead of you working for the data and working for IT. Now, this transition in and of itself is not a difficult thing, right? And that's another thing that people think, right? Oh my gosh, you know, this transition. You can actually start small and gradually transition to this modern infrastructure, right? You don't have to wait until the sun and Jupiter are at opposition to one another, which, by the way, is going to happen late in September if you're an astrologist or an astronomer, right? You can do this right away, right? So don't wait for the stars to be perfectly aligned for you to do this, right? You can do this now. So, and that reminds me that reminds me of a timing joke. Are you ready for this one? Have you ever noticed that it only takes about, I don't know, depending on where you live, 10 minutes to walk to the bar and an hour to walk home? There's a reason for that. Yeah, and the difference is staggering, right? If you've ever been to New Orleans in the French Quarter late, you see a lot of that staggering down there. So you can focus all your time and energy building this contraption over on the left, or you can focus on positive outcomes and simplicity like we have on the right. Now, I realize that I've got this little contraption for making smoked whiskey. It's a pretty cool little thing, but it's a lot easier than making these other things on the left. I like to keep it simple. It's one of the reasons why I like Nutanix. And speaking of the opposite of simplicity, that drink that you see up there at the very top of the screen, it's called the Commonwealth. If I'm not mistaken, that is the most complex drink that you can ask a bartender for. So next time you want to have a little fun with bartenders or get thrown out of a bar, maybe ask for a Commonwealth. It has some ridiculous number of ingredients, right? And keep in mind, right? This is important. You're not a sommelier, right? You're a technologist. That's why you're here talking to us. So therefore, you do not have to keep making poor decisions as it relates to your IT, okay? Now, in the meantime, we can learn a lot from big cloud providers, right? They've already learned the value of decomplexification, right? People, they want to go to cloud, they want to use this as a service model, right? And there's a number of reasons for that, such as rapid time to market, fractional IT consumption, right? You pay for what you use when you use it. That's a little nebulous, right? In terms of the value, right? There could be a lot of cost there. But one-click IT operations, super valuable. Continuous innovation, super valuable. But what we do at Nutanix is we take the value of public cloud and we bring it on-prem in order to modernize your on-prem infrastructure, right? We use web scale engineering. We use software-defined everything. We use a self-healing, very, very awesome performance system with what we refer to as commodity hardware. And when we say commodity hardware, basically it's choices of hardware, okay? And you're not limited to your vendor of choice. We support many vendors, but we know that hardware inevitably will break, and we don't want broken hardware to bring down your infrastructure. And so that's why we refer to hardware as commodity, right? All of our secret sauce is in the software, okay? Now, simplicity, it extends to many different things, right? So I want to cover some of those things. First of all, simple to manage, right? We have a management console called Prism that consists of all these sub-management consoles. Just kidding. This is an example of what you get from legacy infrastructure, right? Multiple consoles, multiple silos, multiple specialties, right? It's not efficient. It's not cloud-like, that's for sure, okay? So our solution from a management perspective is Prism, right? In a typical IT environment, there's lots of consoles like you just saw, but we designed Prism to be easy, right, and simple from the ground up. And we want this very rich experience that our customers can take advantage of, right? It manages the entire stack, literally from storage to compute, virtual machines, security. It's all done here in Prism, right? So again, easy to manage and consumer grade, which of course means that it's easy to figure out. Doesn't mean that you can eat it, okay? It's also simple to operate. And the operational aspect has a number of different deployments, which starts with buying infrastructure. It's easy to buy. It's easy to deploy. And I can't overemphasize this, right? Nutanix is very, very easy to deploy. It's simple to manage and use. We just talked about that a second ago. From a troubleshooting perspective, remember that you don't have all of these various moving parts with their various management consoles and their various indistinguishable, distinct life cycles, right? You have a single cohesive solution. So it is much easier to troubleshoot. It's also a lot easier to upgrade. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. And planning for growth, right? So scalability. Let's talk about that one for a second. Actually, before I go there, I want to tell you a math joke, right? Because operations, math, these things go hand in hand. Why should you never mix whiskey and calculus? Because it's dangerous to drink and derive. There you go. There's your math joke for the day, right? So I talked about scalability. I talked about the fact that Nutanix is simple to scale. One of the most challenging and costly aspects of designing around traditional 3-tier is buying enough hardware to support future workloads, right? And the fact that future workloads, future hardware, it changes, doesn't it? Right. So AOS or Nutanix, that's our cloud operating system. It scales linearly. It scales predictably. This is due to the fact that that's facilitated by its core architecture, right? We are not limited to a single platform type. We are not limited to a single hardware type. And what I mean by that is we can mix and match not only workloads, but we can mix and match node types, right? And as we add nodes to the cluster, data is automatically rebalanced. And this is an important thing because we're not saying this component or this server, this VM has to talk to this storage, right? That's old way of doing things. That's traditional. What we want to do is we want to just simply add resources and have data load balanced, right? And we want to maintain data resiliency. So we want the system to be smart enough to know how to protect itself and be resilient and where to put data, right? Now, when we're talking about scalability, there's always this idea of how much do I need? When do I need it, right? That is the hard thing. One of the hard things about scalability. Sorry about that. I've got a... That's working from home 101, right? Sometimes the doorbell rings and the dogs bark. Okay, so from a scalability perspective, a lot of times the hard thing is figuring out what you need and when you need it. We help you with this at Nutanix, right? Through something that we have called Prism Pro that gives you actionable forecasting, right? And this is something that I think is actually very unique with Nutanix. This is our ability to tell you what you're going to need, when you're going to need it, based on your current utilization of the system, right? So you're not buying for future state. Well, I guess you could, but the idea here is you know what you need, when you need it, so that you can plan it instead of it landing on your lap all of a sudden because you miscalculated your storage utilization, for instance, right? And this is the thing when you're looking at any infrastructure. Usually, you're going to run out of something, right? You're going to run out of compute, you're going to run out of data, whatever the case might be. We tell you when that's going to need to occur. And we also do just-in-time expansion, right? So in addition to behavior forecasting, one-click planning in Prism Pro also includes this new feature called just-in-time planning. This particular feature simplifies a virtualization administrator's tasks by aligning the infrastructure expansion with business demands, right? Specifically, it differs from other solutions by using machine language or using machine learning to properly size for future growth, recommending capacity expansion schedules based on your onboarding timelines, and then defining workload sets using business-friendly metrics that make sense to you, right? So scalability, made easy. What else is made easy? A bunch of things, let me tell you, right? For instance, security. What about simplification of security, right? I mean, like, really, whoever says that? Simplicity and security, convenience and security, these things tend to be mutually exclusive, right? But we need to start with a modern infrastructure if we want something that's simple to secure. So if you look at legacy infrastructure, you've got all of these elements that are required to be secured, right? And by the way, complexity from legacy also makes things very difficult to troubleshoot, very difficult to identify root cause analysis. Root cause analysis becomes increasingly important when and if, God forbid, you have a security breach, right? So we do believe that hyperconverged is a much better foundation for security. And as it turns out, security with Nutanix, it's built in, right? Now, I want to focus in here on the breaking down of silos. That's a big one, right? Security breach, what happens? Whoop, finger pointing starts. There's the blame game, right? The focus should be on business outcomes and avoiding these breaches. But a lot of times it's difficult to avoid the breach if you have individual silos of IT whose only concern is the security of their own compartment, of their own silo. That's not a good model for security, right? Now, we've got this really great component now. We call it Security Central. Security Central actually is a SaaS-based solution that looks at your not only your public cloud security stance, but also your on-prem security stance. So this kind of goes along with a security product that we have called Flow. I talk about Flow a lot all the time. I won't talk about Flow specifically today, but Flow is a tool, an integrated, built-in native tool that allows us to apply security policies. And with Security Central, we can actually modify and monitor those policies and be notified if there's a policy breach or lets us consolidate all of our security policies cluster-wide, environment-wide, instead of only being able to look at a specific cluster or a specific cloud. We can look at it all collectively, okay? So simple to secure, that's important. Simple to automate, also very important. Now, I will admit that this screen, this doesn't look simple, this looks complex, but this is an example, of a blueprint in a product that we have called Calm. Again, an integrated product managed through Nutanix Prism, right? This gives us the ability to very easily create blueprints that allow us to not only automate tasks, but replicate tasks, right? Because what is one of the problems with IT nowadays? Repetitive tasks and mistakes that tend to come from repetitive tasks. And that's one of the big values to automation. We make that easy for you in the form of blueprints, in the form of self-service, in the form of automation, right? So when we look at this screen, again, these are just a couple of different screenshots. I want to show you something that I probably haven't shown you previously, is that we can tie playbooks to automation. Let's think about that for a second. What is a playbook? A playbook is a series of tasks that occur as a result of a trigger, right? That trigger can be an alert. That trigger can be the need for cluster expansion. That trigger can be, I've identified a security flaw, do a thing, right? So these can be very complex or they can be very simple. And we actually give you a number of actionable items, right? So this isn't you programming things, because that's the old difficult way. This is you choosing tasks that you want to occur based on some trigger, right? So automation made easy is what I like to call this. And this is just a very simple example of the way we can put together a run book that says, hey, if this particular VM is not using all of the resources, in this particular case, memory that I've assigned to it, this is very common, right? Create a VM, assign too much memory, then what do? Nothing. It uses too much memory forever. And it's not utilization, it's provisioned memory, right? This lets us find those VMs that are over provisioned and take back those resources, right? Because those resources cost money. And this can be done whether you're running stuff in public cloud or whether you're running stuff in your private cloud, okay? So what's the solution to all this? Whiskey. No, actually, I'm just kidding. Well, actually, no, technically whiskey is a solution, but not a solution for IT complexity, right? Nutanix cloud platform is the solution for IT complexity, right? But many of you know us as simply as hyperconverged, right? Well, hyperconverged really is just a step in a process called infrastructure modernization. There are other steps. We talked about a few of those already. And those steps, those things that we have, we used to call those portfolio products, but guess what? Now they're all built in, right? Now, a lot of these products, they still have their names. We've just included them in a packaging model, right? It's so to make it a little easier, right? Now, as far as these products go, and this build out of this slide, you know, you've got flow, you've got data consolidation, you've got automation. In my mind, for modern infrastructure, these things are all no-brainers, right? These are all no-brainers. All of these things also have a net positive effect to the environment. You're not just adding stuff in there just to add it in because some smooth talker sold it to you, right? These things have net positive value, right? That reminds me of another joke. What's the difference between a battery and whiskey? Anybody know? A battery has a negative side, right? Whiskey doesn't, of course. So we've aligned these products with specific portfolios that bring high value solutions, right? So we've got cloud infrastructure as a pillar, right? That includes our hyperconverged security, things like that. We've got cloud management as a pillar. And over the top of that, we've got our unified storage, database services. Many of you may not be familiar with the fact that we have database services and desktop services, right? So what we're saying here is that our portfolio of solutions satisfy whatever workload it is that you have that requires that you to have to drive business outcomes, okay? Now I mentioned data. I want to kind of stay on the data topic for a moment. How do we typically deploy storage, right? And what do we typically use for storing data, right? Well, typically, different types of data have different needs, right? That makes sense. But do you need different infrastructure for all of the different types of data? No, you definitely do not. Nutanix brings the benefits of cloud even to your on-prem storage offerings that provide simplicity, scalability, and intelligence that allow you to consolidate file type storage, block type storage, object type storage, okay? So with this, and we include with this unified management plane that manages all of those storage services with one-click ease, right? One-click-ish, right? It might take two, it might take three, but our philosophy is fewer clicks, more whiskey, right? There you go. So Nutanix modernizes your storage setup, and so you're not buying a NAS for file shares, whack, server name, whack, whatever. You're not buying, you know, big iron storage for, mission critical workloads, right? All of those things can go in the Nutanix cluster and be managed as a single entity. It's very important, and it's a big differentiator, because otherwise your data gets out of hand. You've got different platforms for different types of data. You might even have when you do that, you might even have different backup platforms for different types of data, different silos with their own types of data. That's no good. That, again, continues or perpetuates complexity, right? Now, once you've got your data organized and working for you so well that it'll pass the military inspection, you need to know what's going on with your data. In other words, you need data about your data, right? This is where our product called File Analytics comes in. And by the way, if you have Nutanix, you have File Analytics, right? Because it's an entitlement, regardless of what level of buy-in you have for Nutanix. You've got a TIB of files free, you got a TIB of objects free, and you've got File Analytics free, right? So this File Analytics thing, it is our native storage analytics solution. It gives you deeper insight and visibility into how your users are accessing files or accessing data, technically, because it's not just only file type of data, right? It also provides anomaly detection that identifies potential threats and risks. It enables permission visualization, right? So that an administrator can understand at a very quick glance who has access to what. And it has these very simple dashboards that you can see here right now. When you combine data analytics or file analytics with Flow for security, it's like super security, right? It's more secure than my liquor cabinet, except that you don't need a whiskey to get into it, right? You like that one, didn't you? So file analytics, very important to our ransomware story, right? You have to know what's going on with your data and have a management mechanism that gives you insights and gives you alerts when threats and anomalies are detected, right? You don't want to be like that other guy who week before last couldn't process orders for a week because of a ransomware attack, okay? You don't want that. Your data is important, especially when you don't have access to it, okay? But let's talk about hybrid cloud for a moment, right? That's kind of where a lot of people are going. I've talked about all these things and you're thinking, wow, that's all it's all on-prem and I want to go to cloud. Well, you can go to cloud. That's cool, right? In many cases, people want this hybrid cloud model. In fact, if you look at all of the IT and CIO surveys and things like that, it's like, what is the most attractive operating model from a infrastructure perspective? Well, it's hybrid cloud. It's the ability to use both on-prem cloud and off-prem cloud or public cloud. Again, we make that decision easy for you. Our products seamlessly integrate with cloud. So we take private cloud and we extend to public cloud. And not only do we extend to public cloud, but we use the native constructs of public cloud. What does that mean? You're not creating yet another silo, right? Because technically, when you have all this on-prem infrastructure and you decide to go to public cloud, you got to have somebody who knows that. This is just another thing that you've got to learn, another silo, right? So you extend Nutanix to public cloud. Guess what you're doing? You're still using Nutanix to manage and operate in public cloud. Again, easy decision-making, right? Now, the one thing that often is not easy about public cloud is cost governance, right? That is yet another thing that we do for our customers is we provide cloud cost governance, and we can compare cost in cloud, and not only in one cloud, and not only Nutanix enabled cloud, but your entire public cloud footprint can be analyzed for cost with our cost governance. our cloud cost governance, and we can then compare that to on-prem, which of course means that everything comes on-prem. Now, I'm just kidding. That's not actually the way that works. But you can compare cost and do this spend analysis. You can do budgeting, create cost centers, all this great stuff with this tool that we have called cloud governance. We used to call it Beam. Now we call it cost governance. You can see that in that console name there. It says Beam, but that is actually part of Nutanix Cloud Management, right? Remember that that pillar we had there? So here's another example of how we use that and where we use that, right? So we can look at underutilized public cloud-based virtual machines, right? And this is a bad thing. Underutilization in cloud is bad. Why? Because you're paying for whatever it is that you think you were going to utilize. And if you're not utilizing it, guess what? The meter is still running. So you need to have something that actually lets you know that you know, your dev organization just spun up a bunch of VMs 6 months ago that you're paying a fortune for, and they're not using all of that, compute. They're not using all that storage. You need to go get that. And in many cases with this tool, you could do one-click remediation, right? Very valuable. Now, what about application mobility, right? What about that move to cloud? What if you wanted to move your apps to any cloud in their own native format and enable your digital transformation journey? Well, this is a thing that you're going to have to deal with if you want to go to cloud, because most people, they don't start in cloud, they start on-prem, and you've got to migrate to on-prem. So that hybrid cloud story, very important. But what's also important is the ability to move those workloads. And guess what? We've got a tool called Move, right? How clever is that? It allows us to move workloads on-prem, and it also allows us to move workloads if you're a customer of the newly formed Broadcom hypervisor group. No, I'm just kidding. That actually hasn't happened yet. We suspect it's going to, but I like to poke fun a little bit and call the, instead of saying ESX, I like to say Broadcom hypervisor. But if you have that, we actually have this tool that can move workloads to and from your ESX infrastructure, your Broadcom hypervisor infrastructure, and it works with cloud too, right? How handy is that? Super handy. Now, whatever you do, do not forget to protect your data, right? You've got to be able to protect your data. And again, we make that easy in a number of different ways, by the way. So if we look at this, we can provide DR between a primary site and a secondary site, right? Now, what third party are we using for that? None, because it's integrated with our solution, this integrated one-click disaster recovery. Whether it's async, near sync, or metro, we provide one-click failover, failback, and here's the one that you're gonna love, testing, right? What is the worst job of the year in traditional IT? Testing failover, testing DR. When do you test DR? Oh, I don't know, like at midnight on January the 1st, when literally nobody is working so that there's no disruption. We don't want to do that, right? We want to test DR in real world scenarios, right? We can also orchestrate recovery plans and automate those, right? DR, or cluster outage is detected, cluster comes up somewhere else, right? Now that can be extended to our own DR as a service, where we can have live VMs, offline VMs. So, and by the way, Choice is exceptionally good at helping you set this up, because this is billed as a maybe as kind of a do-it-yourself. Don't do this yourself. Let Choice help you, right? DR, very important. You don't want to take that on by yourself. Let the experts come in and give you some assistance, right? Now, Nutanix also has, as I mentioned, has this comprehensive range of DR and data protective solutions. So whatever your DR goals are, whatever your, whether you have one site, two sites, whether you want disaster recovery as a service, whether you want to use public cloud for DR, that's okay. We can facilitate that, right? Because I'm telling you, when it comes to disaster recovery, you want cheers, not jeers. Okay. Speaking of jeers, how are those jokes? You want another one? Here's a good one for you. Why do ghosts hang out at bars? Because they like booze, right? That joke has spirit. So regardless of the data type that you have, regardless of the DR mechanism that you want to leverage, right? We can help you with that 100%. Okay. And it's very important. I mean, I can't overemphasize the importance of many things, but data protection and disaster recovery, that is absolutely essential. You've got to have that. Okay. So all of this ties together into the thing that is 100% the most important to us, which is good barbecue. No, I'm just kidding. Customer delight. That is the thing that's most important to us. Now, we talked a little bit about hyperconverged. We talked about unified storage, security, data protection, hybrid cloud. Let's talk about support, right? Let's talk about customer satisfaction. When you look at this chart, try to move your eyes over to the left. I know you're having trouble because that's taking your eyes off that tomahawk steak that I made and that fancy knife that I got from this custom knife maker here locally. By the way, that's a really, really big steak. And that's a really, really big knife. That cutting board that you look at, that's, I don't know, probably 18 or 20 inches wide. So the picture may not do it justice, but when you make a big steak, you got to have a big knife to cut it with, right? Now, when you look over on the left and you look at our NPS score, very, very important. A 90 NPS score is literally an undeniable testament to our relentless pursuit of customer satisfaction. In addition to our customer satisfaction rate in and of itself, right? This basically says whether or not customers will recommend our support. So, and we've been here for many, many years. In fact, we've been tracking it for, I think, 6, 8 years, something of that nature, always in the 90s. And so, you know, much like Choice, we are myopically focused on customer satisfaction. Okay. And again, this is an indicator of whether you'd recommend us to your friends. It's very, very important to us. Okay. So you want to get a taste of this, right? You want to check it out. You want to check it out for yourself. Listen, if you don't believe anything I've said, you can try it for yourself at Nutanix test drive, right? So if you go to nutanix.com /one platform, or if you just Google for Nutanix test drive, you literally can get hands-on with Nutanix via these guided tours that we have of our technology. You know, much like the guided tour of barbecue that you could get if you came to my house and mixing good whiskeys. No, I'm just kidding. Don't everybody rush over right away. I don't have my my smoker on, but it's important for you guys and gals to be able to try the technology. This isn't necessarily a try before you buy, but this is a very nice guided process through many of our technologies. You want to deploy database as a service, it's in test drive. You want to create policies using flow microsegmentation, it's in test drive. And it doesn't take months or years or weeks or all day to do these exercises, right? It literally is a guided tour of the technology where you're clicking and you're typing and you know exactly what you're doing because it has all these great explanations. So test drive, if you haven't tried it out, you got to go check that out. So that's all I got. I appreciate everybody joining. It looks like I can check the chat, but I want to leave the quote up from Mark Twain, who said, "Too much of anything is bad, but too much good whiskey and barbecue and so many other things are barely enough." So I appreciate your time. Hopefully you learned something today. And if you would like to get more information on any of the topics that I touched on, feel free to reach out to your contacts at Choice, reach out to us. and we'll be happy to help guide you through this journey of infrastructure modernization.